Allan Mott returns to solidify his status as Cinema Shame's go-to authority on bad movies we love. Put on your just happy to be nominated faces, because on this episode of the Cinema Shame podcast, we're doing a deep dive into 1966's legendarily bad The Oscar.
You think you've seen, you'll find it's not enough. No matter what you think you know, you won't get through. No matter how that film is shown, what always sounds the same. All over the screen with fire stain, with no tone. You can feel so real.
Welcome to the Cinema Shame podcast, the only podcast that tells the viewer they're inadequate in every way. My name is James, but some of my guests call me Jay because I told them to. I'll be your host, coming to you live from the Shame Quarters, sponsored by DVD Netflix, because yes, you too can get DVDs in the mail if you want them bad enough. Today, we're talking about a movie for which you should be equally ashamed for having seen as not having seen, and that's kind of the specialty of my guest tonight. His name's Allan Mott, the pretentious asshole in charge of Vanity Fair, the pretentious asshole's guide to B-movie bullshit. He is also newly inoculated. Welcome on the show again. Our last episode was such a fan favorite, and I mean that literally there was like one fan.
Yeah.
That I had to get you back on to talk about a movie you requested pretty much shortly after we finished that Boom episode.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm going to let you introduce the movie because sometimes it's just better that way.
Well, okay, so last time with Boom, my choice was based on the fact that I had read all of these books, like as a kid, about bad movies, and they had fascinated me and made me want to see these movies. But the thing about bad movies is that generally they're usually a lot harder to find than good movies because they're bad, and the studios involved lost a lot of money on them. So they're like, we're not going to release this on video. We're not going to make this easy for people to see. We're embarrassed by this. So
this was kind of the E.T. video game.
Yeah.
Of bad movies too. It really was hard to find for a while.
So for last time we talked about Boom, which was inspired by sort of my reading the Medved books and then later on John Waters' books. But this time around, we're going to talk about a movie that was I wanted to see ever since I read, to me, what is probably the holy grail of bad movie cinema books, which is Stephen Rebello's and Edward Margulies' Bad Movies We Love, which came out around 1991 or so, that area. And it was connected to the Movie Line magazine, which people may briefly remember. It's like sort of short attempt to be an online website. But if you weren't around for its actual heyday, it was sort of the movie magazine of choice for people who thought Premiere was a bit too industry and too sort of like serious and just sort of not fun, whereas Movie Line was very sort of snarky but also loving at the same time. You could tell these people genuinely loved movies, and it's not like sort of like what I call the cinema sins thing, where people have realized there's money to be made, making fun of movies, which was sort of like the issue I had with the Medved books when I reread them. And the movie from Bad Movies We Love that I always wanted to see but never had a chance to was a movie called The Oscar.
Not to be confused with the 1991 Sylvester Stallone vehicle.
Directed by John Landis.
Indeed. Which is also could also be featured on a similar episode. It is better than you think.
Oh yeah, no, I mean Tim Curry should have got an Oscar nom for that.
Absolutely. It's actually a quite funny movie. The problem really is that
Sylvester Stallone.
Right. you know, and if you take that as part of the whole package and just kind of let him do his thing and appreciate the way that the movie happens all around him, it's a hugely enjoyable comedy. I can't say I have a similar thought about this movie because it's more the inverse of that.
Yeah.
In that there's like one sane thing about this movie and the rest is just a disaster.
Well, it's generally like people have like discussions of what is and isn't camp. And for me, the Oscar is 100% camp because it is a movie that had very specific ideas in mind of what it wanted to be, and then is completely incapable of making that a reality. It has this idea of what it wants to be, and it just can't do it. And that's what makes it really amazing. And also the thing that also makes it very sort of unique is that it's the only movie with a screenplay by Harlan Ellison. And that's something that I think really, really informs why it is how it is.
No. It's not that I don't like computer services. What I don't like are the harebrained idiots who get on these computer bulletin boards and spend all night long bad-mouthing people with impunity, spreading gossip and doing ugliness. They are, you see, what bothers me about the information superhighway is that it is going to be traversed by the same imbeciles who are walking around without an information superhighway. Right. See, in the old days, guys like this would have a fanzine, and they were semi-literate, and they couldn't spell. Now they got a spell checker. Ooh, a spell checker means they can be complete boneheads, and they get on these lines, and they're very defensive about it. Oh, sure. They're like members of a devil cult who resent it when you say you shouldn't bite the heads off chickens.
But according to the commentary, the original script for this movie was 300 pages long.
I believe it. I having read Harlan Ellison, I totally see how that's possible.
And the movie actually starts on what would have been the 100th page of the script. So, so it's a movie where it's basically half a movie because it only tells half the story that the screenwriter wanted to tell. And because of this, it's all of the high moments. It's all of the high-pitched moments. There's none of the sort of like kinder, gentler, easier moments that would allow for those moments. So it's a movie that's always at 11. It never has a lower like sort of like pitch, and it's 2 hours long, and it's just insane. And to sum up the plot, basically like the one-line plot, it's about what happens when an actor is who is a total asshole is nominated for the Oscar for Best Leading Man. And sort of the central irony of this movie, and the thing that I think makes it sort of a camp classic and everyone should see, is that it is a movie about an Oscar-worthy actor in which no one could act.
No one. There's two. I picked out two exceptions because I had a little note. What I had in my notes, I said, "What is good about this movie? Like sincerely good about this movie?" I had two notes.
Yeah, no, there are some performances I like, and there are even some bad performances I'll defend. But it is.
There is pure entertainment, and I do have to say that the end of this movie, inspired the most sincere guffaw I have had in a long time.
Well, and the amazing thing about that is that in a case of reality recreating fiction, that ended up actually happening about 10 years later. We'll get into it when we talk about the ending.
Yeah, because we can't get there yet, because you have to have the 2 hour build up to make it really worthwhile.
An actor really did what Frank Fain does at the end of this movie. Hollywood loves making movies about itself, even though they've never made money. And so it's sort of has that navel-gazing quality. But then at the same time, it was written by an outsider. Harlan Ellison really he wrote scripts and stuff like that, but he was never really part of the industry because he was just such a iconoclast and was just always in everybody's faces, that he there was a reason why this was his only screenplay that was produced. Like everything else, he just alienated everyone. So, it didn't matter that he wrote the best Star Trek ever.
TV Guide called it one of the 100 greatest moments in television history. Okay. I wrote that script before the show ever went on the air. Before any of the executives, and I'm purposely not mentioning any executives' names, had established the characters. And my script went a long way to establishing those characters. And I wrote what I thought was a dynamite script. Really a dynamite script. Then, as happens in television, it's the old French joke about the chef who has made a great soup, and all the other chefs come in and they say, well, we must make it just a little bit better, and they all piss in it. Everybody pissed in my script.
But what makes it sort of amazing is that they spent all this money and all of this, big Hollywood production on a movie that it was literally, it's impossible to like the main character. And he's not even compelling. No. So it's one of those movies where you wonder why did they think I would want to see this guy? It's literally becomes a Schadenfreude movie just because you want to see that moment at the end where everything comes crashing down on him, because there's literally and that's sort of and I think that's the result of it being cut down to a 2-hour movie from a 300-page script, is because I'm sure there must have been moments in the original script that made us like the guy. But
it's hard to believe. Having just watched the movie, it's hard to believe that they could have built something in to make it anything he does or says redeemable. But it's funny, they don't even paint Hollywood in a good light either. Nothing about this movie makes Hollywood look good, makes the people in it look good, and it's filled with people important Hollywood actors. Edith Head's in it. Hedda Hopper, all these insiders who are in it because I guess they thought it was some sort of hooray Hollywood movie, like an old canteen picture. Who knows what they were thinking.
Well, but the most amazing thing though is that yes, it makes everyone look terrible, but it's also the only film that had permission from the Oscars to use the Academy Awards and the Oscars as part of their movie. Any other movie you see, when you see them at the what we assume is the Oscars, it's always called the awards, because the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences has a trademark on the Oscars and the Academy Awards, and you can't use those without their permission. And especially after this movie came out, they have never allowed anyone to use it.
Yeah, they burned that down. Okay, so we've got the setup going a little bit here. So let's talk about the players involved in bringing this to the screen. You mentioned Harlan Ellison, so a little bit of backstory on Mr. Ellison here. Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho, said of Harlan Ellison, "He's the only living organism I know whose natural habitat is hot water." Tells you a little something about the personality of the man. He wrote more than 1,700 short stories, novellas, screenplays, comic book scripts, teleplays, essays, etc., and so forth. He was into everything. He wrote everything. He stuck his nose into everybody's business. He, as you said, he's known for writing probably the best Star Trek episode in The City on the Edge. The short story I wrote down, I have not read it, but now I'm going to, is called Repent Harlequin! ! Which brings us back to your Boom episode.
Yeah.
Repent Harlequin, save the TikTok man.
Yeah, some movies have been based on his stuff, like A Boy and His Dog.
A Boy and His Dog, he wrote the novella. And he was a prolific TV writer. He wrote for the Loretta Young Show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Route 66, The Outer Limits, Flying Nun, Burke's Law, Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and so on and so forth. His infamous feud, I have that in quotes, with Frank Sinatra, because it's so stupid, it has to be read to be believed, is documented by Gay Talese in the article Frank Sinatra Has a Cold, where Sinatra reportedly disliked Ellison's boots while they're playing billiards, and this became an actual row between the two of them. It sounds to me, having read it, is that Frank Sinatra just despised him to begin with, and the boots were a nice scapegoat.
Well, that's what happens when you have two hotheads in a room together. Yeah.
Another interesting anecdote I pulled up on Harlan Ellison. He was hired by Walt Disney Studios. Now, in what world does that fit? Well, he didn't last a day because Roy fired him after he heard him making a joke in the kitchen or break room, something. I couldn't quite tell where it was overheard, about a particular pair of Disney characters starring in pornography. I was hoping for more detail there, maybe one of his comic book plays, but alas, there was no more to be found for that particular story. So that's our writer, and he teamed with Clarence Green and Russell Rouse to bring the screenplay to completion.
The screenwriters of Pillow Talk.
Yeah. I do have to wonder the extent, because I was reading up on that. Once I read that, I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because you read the list of their other works, which are distinctly more noir.
Yeah.
They wrote the original DOA. Yeah. They were nominated for an Academy Award for The Well, which is a movie I have not seen.
And I think in the case of the Oscar, I think probably their job was more editorial than actually contributory.
Yeah.
I think it's basically took the 300-page script, and I guess there's also a 194-page script that was Harlan's shorter version. So I'm sure they just took that and they made what we see. But when you watch the movie, and if you know, like, if you've read, like, especially if you read any of Harlan Ellison's criticism, it's very much his voice.
And this pair, they had developed a screenwriter-director situation, and Russell Rouse is credited as the director, and for all intents and purposes, this movie ended their careers.
Yeah, I think they did one after this one.
It was already in production before this was released.
With the same actor, with William Boyd. So sort of like, I imagine that when they were midway through that and the Oscar came out, they were like, the
question that was on my mind as I was watching it, and this is something that I'm sure we've touched on already, and we'll talk about it again, is intention and execution.
Yeah.
And the line between this being a stirring Hollywood melodrama, a la something like Bad and the Beautiful, which certainly had to be something they were looking at as a model.
I think the model that was in Ellison's head was Sweet Smell of Success.
Okay. That makes sense. The pair of front guys here. Yeah. Anyway, the point is, if they're pulling from Bad and the Beautiful, Sweet Smell of Success, there's a certain path that they took that led them far astray. And that then brings into the conversation whether this is drama or whether it's comedy, and how we interpret that as viewers. Whether, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, because I read the contemporaneous reviews, and I'm not so sure they found it nearly as funny as I did. So I'm wondering how much time has impacted our reading of the Oscar.
Well, I think that's because, like, 1966 was just such a year, like, it was basically the beginning of the transition.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was such, like, so you have this, and then people, like, are seeing Bonnie and Clyde, and so it's, and also the French New Wave. And so I think some people had a very good idea of what this film could have been with, you know, like, if it had gone in a different direction and taken that sort of same sort of basic story. And so, like, that's why it wasn't sort of necessarily viewed as a comedy, just as a failure. I personally, like, to me, it is camp, like, in that it is a very, very, very serious drama that is so overwrought and badly done that it becomes a comedy. I don't think it was intentionally designed to be a comedy. It's not intentionally funny, but it is nonetheless completely hilarious.
So let's talk. We'll do a little bit more in depth on the plot. We can branch off from there. So as you said, it's about. Well, we go back a little bit further. Main character's name is Frankie Fain. There's a lot of terrible character names as well.
Which probably come from the novel. We might not be able to blame that on Ellison, because this is based on a novel, which apparently is completely different from the movie. I guess it actually looks at the 5 different nominees instead of just the one, and it's also much more about the politics of trying to get an Oscar than it is like it's a very different movie. Ellison basically just sort of ignored it.
Okay, so Frankie Fain it opens with him about to hear if he won the Best Actor Oscar. And as he's sitting there white-knuckling his seat by himself, which
would never happen.
No.
Because a seat filler would come and sit beside him immediately.
But it's symbolic, you see.
Yeah.
His friend Jaime,
who would never be there.
Right. Who is really just his personal assistant at this point. Jaime is reminiscing about Fain's struggle to the top, and the choice of words in this opening sequence is curious because it's not the same tone as what happens at the end. I mean, if you're just looking at some of the basic building blocks of filmmaking that fall apart, it's that the words that they use to describe the struggle and like his go-get-'em attitude to get to the top, it doesn't match what happens at the end.
You finally made it, Frankie. Oscar night. And here you sit on top of a glass mountain called success. You're one of the chosen 5, and the whole town's holding its breath to see who won it. It's been quite a climb, hasn't it, Frankie? Down at the bottom, scuffling for dimes in those smokers, all the way to the top. Magic Hollywood. Ever think about it? I do, friend Frankie. I do.
And Jaime is played by none other than Tony Bennett, who's
his only acting role.
If you ever watch this movie, you will see why he never acted again.
And I mentioned earlier, like, bad performances I'm willing to defend. I actually really like Tony Bennett in this.
It's one of those performances that you're watching and like he is so out of his element.
Yeah.
And he's trying so hard. I mentioned Frankie Fain white-knuckling the seat.
Yeah.
Tony Bennett is white-knuckling every line.
Yeah. Well, a professional actor would not have been able to make a lot of these lines work.
No.
The fact that it's Tony Bennett, and also like the even bigger victim of this than Tony Bennett is Elke Summer, who like I was ready to call the cops on the people who cast her in this movie.
Criminal.
It is just so painful. But the truly amazing thing is that they cast Tony Bennett and they don't make his character a singer.
Right.
Which would have been super easy. They could have had a Tony Bennett song on their soundtrack. One of the world's greatest popular singers of all time, and he doesn't sing a note.
And it's not like he's an unknown upstart in the business. Like, he's been an established recording star before this point. This isn't like, who's that guy?
It's because he was a name from being a singer. But they purely cast him as an actor. And the thing, after that moment at the beginning, which is at the Oscars, we move on to their early days, which is hilarious because how they started in the business, if you will, is they would travel around from town to town with Jill St. John, and Jill St. John was a stripper, and William Boyd, who is Frankie Fain, was her basically hype man. So he would get the dudes excited about, they're going to see a naked Jill St. John, which to me is like the most unnecessary job in the world.
Gentlemen, what you're about to see is a form of art. Art that comes to you from way back in the dawn of time. From that first little bit of art they called Eve. The kind of round and warm art that made that old snake serpent that the blind staggers start crawling around backwards. I'm talking about Helen of Troy, man. About Cleopatra. I'm talking about woman, friends. I'm talking about Miss Laurel, the one and only hip-switching, nice-walking bunch of loveliness you're going to see right now. Let's hear it for Miss Laurel.
And then there's Tony Bennett's character, whose name is Jaime Kelly. He basically just is like has no purpose there at all. He doesn't even end up collecting the money. So it's like you wonder why he's there at all.
He's not a tough guy.
It would have been easy for in that scene, instead of having like to have made like sort of Frankie Fain like sort of the tough guy who collects the money, and have Tony Bennett sing a song.
Yeah, it could have been used. There was, like you said, it's just a simple rewrite to give them more than just a stripper show, which it's admittedly
pretty great. I mean, we don't see much, but what we do see makes me realize that Jill St. John would have been a great stripper.
No, I mean, no complaints. It certainly is like this movie has its head in the right place in the beginning. It gets what we want. We want Jill St. John.
And we got it. Like the other thing we have to talk about this movie is that not only does it have Edith Head in it, but it has Edith Head as its designer. And this is probably one of the most Edith Head designed movies I've ever seen. And it was shot in Pathé color. It wasn't shot in Technicolor, but it is very much like every color jumps at you. Like if there's a reason for a movie to be on Blu-ray, like the Oscar is it, because if you just like turn it on mute and don't actually hear what they're saying, it is a gorgeous looking movie. And the costumes
I'd watch that movie.
As over the top as they are, really make this a fun movie to watch. And in the stripper scene, Jill St. John has like this tiger stripe sort of outfit that just it's one of those things where like if I had bought a ticket when this came out, that scene alone would have been like, oh yeah, no, I spent my money well on this.
And to progress the narrative, they get scammed out of the money, and they raise a ruckus and knock the proprietor flat. Well, the proprietor's in with the cops. The cops make life difficult. They arrest them for prostitution. And they have to sell Jill St. John's car to get out of town quick. They lose their money, they lose everything, and they make a new start in New York City, because that's where you go when you're flat broke.
My favorite part of that is like she puts out her thumb to get like the truck to stop, and then they run into the back of, and it's like just a regular sort of like delivery truck, but for some reason the back is open, so they can just run in. Like it's sort of like I think that's kind of unsafe.
And promptly, Frankie dumps Jill St. John for an aspiring fashion designer named Kay. This is, of course, Elke Summer,
who he meets at a beatnik party.
You're a tourist or a native?
Take one from column A and two from column B. You get an egg roll either way.
I have a feeling I'm not going to get anywhere with you.
All depends where you'd like to get.
Mostly I'd like to get along with you somewhere. Get to know you better?
Get to know you better usually means I'd like to make a pass at you.
Anything wrong with that?
You're wasting your time. I'm not the kind of woman who uses sex as a release or even as a weapon.
You always talk like that?
I try.
But do me a favor, will you? Try dropping it with me. I'm not that smart. You free thinkers confuse me.
The other thing I like about this scene where he meets Elke Summer for the first time is that all of like their two shots are normal, but then we have these close-ups of her that are filmed through like 10 things of gauze, and super soft focus. And I'm wondering why. I mean, like I can understand if it was an older actress, and they really need to hide the lines. But this was Elke Summer in 1966. You could have shot her in straight high def, and she would have gotten away with it. So like he ends up getting a job at wherever she works. We're not actually it's some sort of fashion thing, but we're not actually told what it is. And then she takes him to this rehearsal a friend of her is having. and the stage actors are playing toughs in a night fight.
Let's go.
Just a little long.
Terrible.
Since when have you become an authority on acting?
I don't know anything about acting.
And keep your voice down, you're embarrassing.
Those two jokers don't know how to handle a knife.
Now, Jan, little thrust. That's it. That's good.
If they ever get into a rumble, they wind up looking like cheesecloth. Look at them, will you? A couple of clowns.
And because he's a real tough guy, he's just totally scoffing at what they're doing. You know, it's like, yeah, no, that would never happen like that. And they hear him, and he ends up getting on stage and like having this total psycho moment where he like shows them what a real tough guy with a knife is like. And this happens to be seen by a movie studio scout played by Eleanor Parker, whose whole shtick is how old she is because she's 42.
Right, I had to look that up. She doesn't even look 42.
Yeah, well, she was 44 at the time. She she's her character is 42, and she looks gorgeous. Like she gets a few of the soft filter moments too, but then there are other shots where she's just normal, and they're like, are we supposed to accept that this is a woman that the men in Hollywood find hideous?
Yeah, at one point she's rolling around. She's rolling around in her bed, bemoaning middle age.
She meets with Eleanor Parker meets with Elkie Summer and Frankie at a restaurant, and it's a very strange scene because he's basically the same level of rudeness he's always been throughout the movie, but for some reason now it really upsets Elkie Summer, and she runs away, and that's sort of the thing that's inexplicable about their sort of romance, is that you never actually see the moments where she would have actually wanted to spend time with him.
Don't con me, Frankie. Offer me. What were you ever going to offer me? The chance to fight you off every time we got together? So fine, now you got the yacht and you got cars and they saved the best table for you at the best restaurants. So what? You haven't changed. It's that seed of rot inside of you, which makes you what you are, that you can't change. You just dress it better.
Oh, I get it. I think I understand. Maybe it's that thing inside me, that rot, that evil you think you see. Maybe that's what turns you on.
Take me home, Frankie.
You slapped my face the first time I made a pass at you. But you got me a job that kept me near you. Every time I tried to get close, you pushed me away, but not too far. That Middle European peasant upbringing of yours, baby. They told you so often that playing house with a guy was dirty, you got all knotted up inside. But you like to play. So you can't get turned on by a guy who treats you nice, a schlep like the one you were out with tonight. But a guy who wipes his feet on you, that you dig.
Shut up.
Because he's always like an asshole at 11.
Right after this scene, I wrote, Frankie is a turd in big capital letters, period. And there really is no, like you said, there's no moment where you're like, oh, he's a good guy down beneath that gruff exterior that he's had to build up in order to protect himself over the years doing these hard jobs, which we still don't even know what he's done. Like there's just nothing to him besides him being a turd. Like that's his single defining characteristic.
Yep, and so Elkie Summer runs off, and then he has this monologue about I can't remember exactly what the nature of it is, but it's basically like he ends up breaking down and crying in front of Eleanor Parker, and just as she's sort of like feeling super awkward in that, he lifts his face up and is like, gotcha, huh?
Gotcha moment.
Like, I'm a really good actor, huh? And that's what inspires her to take him to Hollywood. And to help her, she gets Milton Berle to be his agent. And they go to Joseph Cotten. And based on a screen test, they convince Joseph Cotten to give him like a studio contract. And the next thing you know, he's an actor in movies. And because it's this amazing scene where he's staying at this sort of like basically Harlan Ellison's idea of what a Hollywood apartment is like, because they're walking by the pool and the world's most gorgeous bikini models are all by the pool, and I'm not sure they're all in this scene, but I know that like actresses like Edie Williams and Phyllis Davis, who are both in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, they play extras in this movie. So that's the level of hot lady extras we have in this movie. And so they walk across the pool into his like new apartment, which is much fancier than what he was living before, but it's still small. And Jaime starts unpacking, and Frankie asks about Jill St. John, and Jaime is like, she's dead,
and that's it.
Yeah. And he was, I married her, and now she's dead.
Yeah, there's no more questions.
And that's it for Jill St. John. And a part of me was like, fuck this movie. And then after that, then we get sort of Frankie's sort of rise. Like, and the amazing thing about this movie is that it's a movie about movie stars and the making, like, about like Hollywood, and you never once see him on set, and you never once see any of the movies he appears in. It's like the closest you get are a couple of scenes on the studio lot, which very much like they're not quite level of like guys in Roman like gladiator outfits and stuff like that. It's mostly instead like pretty ladies in showgirl outfits.
Yeah, it's just like pretty ladies and like old white guys walking around. There's nothing going on. There's no use of this treasure trove of potential creativity.
And apparently from what I heard, this was like one of the main things that got cut out of the Harlan Ellison's original script. Apparently there was a subplot about him going to Italy and making a movie with basically like the movie's version of Sophia Loren, and there was a bunch of stuff like that. So there was actual like movie making in this movie about like people who make movies. But I think for whatever reason that just stuff had to go. So yeah, we don't even see like a clip of the movie he ends up being nominated for. Like we're lucky we even get the title. And that's sort of like the amazing thing is like usually the reason why like filmmakers like to do movies about movies is because then they can do meta stuff and have like, you know, like The Player has like a bunch of like really cool like movie within a movie moments.
Right. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, some of the best parts of that movie are the movie within a movie.
But with this, it's purely about Frankie Fain. That's all it cares about.
The only information we get about any of the movies that he's in is like some of his co-stars. Like they complain about how he was just a co-star in someone else's movie. He's not the box office attraction. Yeah, because like basically
Joseph Cotton has decided that it's not worth having to deal with this asshole. And like when Milton Berle points out like how much money his movies has made, Cotton's like, no, he hasn't. All the movies he's in that have made money co-starred like John Wayne or Shirley MacLaine. Like he made movies with other movie stars, and those movies made money. When he made movies by himself, they didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm. And then the only other information we have is when Milton Berle, Cappy, says that he only got nominated because he played himself, a man without morals. So we know that in the movie he's nominated for, he's playing the turd.
Yeah, he's playing himself.
Yeah,
and also I don't know if he's one of the two that you mentioned, but I actually do think Milton Berle does a pretty good job here. He seems to be the one who can handle like sort of like the language better than anyone else. Like,
well, he's got a natural presence. It's like, okay, you're selling it, and then he understands how to, you know, moderate the emotion. It's not all at 11. You've got some 2s and 3s, and then there's a rise and fall. Like, he's a human. Like, he does human things. He talks mostly like a human, except for some of the dialogue. But by and large, Milton Berle survives this movie. And I'm like, wow, that was a really great Milton Berle dramatic performance. I'm glad I saw that.
Well, this is mentioned in the commentary with Josh Olson, who hosts the Movies That Made Me podcast with Joe Dante. And he mentioned like how he thought Berle was good in the movie. And Dante was like, Berle is good in every movie. Like people have this idea because he was like Mr. Television and he did this really broad TV show where he dressed in ladies' clothing, that he was just this bad comedian. But if you actually watch his movies, he always usually gave a really good performance. And that made me think back to movies where I saw him like as just a straight actor, and I can't disagree. Like he was a good actor.
And I think he stands out in this movie
because everyone else is so awful.
Yeah, they're just all over the place. He's the only one. Well, again, I had two notes, two truly professional actors in this movie.
Well, we can't skip over the part where he meets Ernest Borgnine, because this is easily the worst part of the movie.
Is it?
It is. I think so. I think the stuff in Mexico is the worst part of the movie.
Yeah.
And we can't blame like Rouse and Green on this. This is 100% Harlan Ellison, because apparently the divorce scene and the marriage scene, apparently that part of the script was 18 pages long. Frankie convinces Elkie Summer to go to Tijuana for him for the weekend. And he the reason why he wants to go is because he wants to see a bullfight. And this scene was just, it was hilarious to me, just being like how dated, like this whole movie is very dated. But this scene especially, because they're at a bullfight and they have stock footage of a real bullfight. And the joke is that they're sitting next to Ernest Borgnine and E. Adams. And we think they're just this like normal, like sort of like bubbly, like sort of couple who are there for like, you know, and they're talking about like they need witnesses for what's happening. And they're really excited that they're sitting next to a movie star. And they convince them, like, you have to be our witnesses. You have to be their witnesses. But then, like, sort of the big joke is that they're not being witnesses for their marriage, but for their divorce.
Señoras, señoritas, y caballeros, it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest of honor, Señor Frank Bain. Matador Luis Lozada. Dedicate this bull to Senor Payne and his lovely señorita.
What does it mean, dedicate the bull to you?
It means they cut the ears of the dead carcass and give them to me.
That sounds charming.
The minute I saw you, I told little darling, I said, that's Frankie Payne. I couldn't believe my eyes. Frankie Payne sitting right next to me.
Yeah, Honey Bunny here recognized you right away, Mr.
Trina here's one of your biggest fans. She sees every one of your shows. Isn't that right, Doll?
Nice to know you, Trina. This is Miss Bergdahl.
How are you? Hi.
I just adore your pictures. I saw that one, you know, where you played the private eye 3 times. Honey Bunny here's the private eye. I guess that's why.
Named Bonnie Yale. I got my own agency in L.A. Hey, what are you doing after the corrida? Goddess and me got big things planned.
Thanks, Barney, but we got plans.
Hey, look, we've been together now for 3 years, and we finally made the big decision. Oh, come on. We'd be honored if you'd be our witnesses.
What do you say, Miss Bergdahl? Oh, it'd be a thrill to have you and a big celebrity like Frank Payne as our witnesses. Guy. Please?
Frankie, what do you think? Let's go, huh? I love weddings.
Weddings? Who said anything about weddings? We came down here to get a divorce.
And then sort of like the thing that really like sort of like made me just like cringe is that then we the whole time this is happening, Frankie keeps like looking at like sort of the bullfight because he's like annoyed that he's missing the action of like the bullfight while Borgnine is talking. And then just at the moment when Elkie agrees to like to go like witness their divorce, we cut to like the bull being dead, and we cut to like Boyd as Fane, and he's disappointed that he missed the bull getting killed.
Like a petulant 5-year-old child.
Yeah, like that was something you could not do today. People would not be allowed that to happen in a movie, and like that just goes to level of asshole. Like this is a guy who is pissed off he didn't see an animal get killed.
Yeah.
And then we cut to them at the actual divorce ceremony, and it is the most stereotypical. Like literally, at one point, the guy who's giving the divorce like rolls up his sleeve, and he's got like 10 watches on his arm. And like, hey, buddy, you want to buy a watch? And apparently this was cut down. Apparently there was a sequence where he tried to sell them hubcaps. And like, it was extremely racist. And it is like even more, like it is just as racist, like in the cut down version. Like he originally says the divorce is going to be $15. But then the next time he mentions the price, it's $25. And so like that we have that sequence. And then we have they go to a nightclub where basically Ernest Borgnine sort of like tries to dance Elkie Summer to death on the floor, and Fane and Summer manage to escape, and they end up like getting all romantic, and they decide that they're going to get married at the same place where Borgnine just got the divorce. This movie tries to do some like cinematic type stuff. There's a lot of stuff with mirrors that I'm not sure symbolizes anything, but it is something that Rouse tries to do. But the other thing, and apparently this was actually in the script, is that when we earlier in the movie we see Fane and Eleanor Parker like after their post-sex thing, Parker is posed in a very specific way with her back and everything. And then after Fane and Summer get married, Summer is posed the exact same way. And apparently that was in the script. That wasn't an accident. Ellison very much wanted the two scenes to sort of mirror each other. I'm not sure why, but it was important to him. So now we can move forward. So right. Yeah. Fane has basically screwed his career so much that he's reduced to trying to get a role in a pilot, which he like is considered like the lowest form of showbiz for a movie star. And this is another instances of two scenes being mirrored, because the first time we saw him in Hollywood, he's in Joseph Cotton's office. And we see him sitting apart from his agent and and Eleanor Parker and the head of the studio, while they're talking about him like he's a piece of meat, like as if he's not even there and can't hear what they're saying. And he's fingering the statue, like sort of seething that he has to like go through this. And then we cut to like him at a meeting with different executives, and it's the exact same situation with a different statue. And he's like, but now it's even worse, because before at least it was to be a movie star. Now it's to star in a TV show. But then they get the word that there's a call for him from Jaime that he absolutely has to take. And so he leaves the meeting, goes out in the office. And this is hilarious because for whatever reason, that day, Jaime was at the Academy offices.
Now, Mr. Fane looks clean-cut to me. He isn't one of those snotty little punks with too much hair that they have on those other shows. We need a man of this sort for promotion. A man that men will look at and say, he's a man. That's a necessity.
Mr. Kelly for Mr. Fane.
Tell him to leave a number. We're in conference.
He says it's urgent. Extremely urgent.
I'll take it in the outer office. You go ahead. I'll catch up.
I don't think we need to worry about Fane being a man.
He looks like a real man.
Hell, he's a man, all right.
You can take it right over there, Mr. Fane.
Jaime?
You've just been nominated for an Oscar.
What? I can't hear you.
I'm at the Academy, and they just released the Oscar nominations. Frankie, do you hear me? I said they just nominated you for the Best Actor. Breakthrough. You and Burton and Lancaster and...
Jaime, this is a guy got kill you.
Hey, Frankie, congratulations.
So help me, Frankie. It's no gag. It's the Emmys, the truth. You've been nominated. Frankie? Frankie?
Talk to you later.
Frankie, they're getting impatient.
I don't think I can make it.
What are you talking about?
I'm not doing that nitwit series.
Wait a minute, Frankie. This is one of the major networks. They've already put money into the project. They brought out an important sponsor.
That's their problem. No one told them to go ahead.
I told them to go ahead.
Then it's your problem. I never authorized it.
You didn't sit there in the Polo Lounge and say, go ahead, Cappy. Save my life, Cappy. Let me keep my car, my home, my yacht. You didn't do this?
One phone call. And I'm not dog meat like I was in Regan's office, like I was in there a minute ago. One phone call. So just go sliding back in there and tell him game called on account of Oscar. That's right. Oscar. That phone call from Jaime. Category nominations were announced. I was nominated for Breakthrough. So, go tell old Quintaplack and his wife Phyllis I won't be able to come to their house party Saturday night.
Right, with his very official credentials of being the leech attached to Freddie Fane.
So he excitedly tells them that he's been nominated and for Best Actor for the movie Breakthrough. And I think this is maybe the second time we've actually heard the title of the movie that he's nominated for.
And when I heard that, I thought that they had created a new Academy Award category just for him, like Breakthrough Actor. I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever.
That was a Golden Globes category for a long time.
Yeah.
The one Pia Sonora won. So as soon as he hears this, he tells Burl, like, okay, yeah, I'm not doing the pilot because clearly, like, I'm going to be an even bigger star now after I win the Oscar. So there's no point in me doing this. And Joss Olson on the commentary makes a good point because Burl tries to convince him to do the pilot, that it's a bad idea to quit. And Olson is like, no, if your client gets an Academy Award nomination, you try to leverage that for more movie work. You don't try and get him a TV pilot. So in a way, Milton Berle is kind of a bad agent.
Yeah, no, I agreed with the abandoning of the TV pilot there. You assume that you can parlay an Academy Award nomination into further to better your movie career, unless you're Freddie Fane.
Yeah, and so Fane decides that he probably can't win just like if he does nothing. So he has to like do some behind the scenes stuff. So that's when he remembers Ernest Borgnine from Mexico, and he comes up with this idea that he'll have Borgnine leak to the press about the time him, Jaime, and Jill St. John were arrested for prostitution in that small town.
When it hits, I want it to hit big. Think you can do it?
Sure I can. I can get it on the front page of every major newspaper in the country within 48 hours.
What happens when they ask who hired you?
You know better than that. It's built in the deal. I'm a private detective. It's privileged communication. Look, if I reveal just the name of one client, I'm out of business.
There's $2,000 in it for you.
1,000 now and 1,000 after I do it, okay?
It's all there. 2,000. Now we don't have to see each other again.
Okay. Now, you want it leaked just this way. You were arrested for prostitution and procuring and jump bail. You and this fella, Jaime Kelly, and a girl by the name of Laurel Scott, right? Hey, Mr. Fane, you're a pretty chilly item. I can't figure you out.
Yeah. How about that?
And his thinking is that if he does this and it's a scandal, then people will assume that it was leaked by the other four nominees in a way to make him get way so people wouldn't vote for him. And so he's sort of like trying to play three chess moves ahead. And there's this fun scene where it's a press conference. And you talk about I think you meant Ernest Borgnine was the other performance you really liked, but for me there's this actress who only has one line, but she's probably my favorite part of the whole movie in that she's the reporter who's sort of with a stripper, and I don't know whatever it was, but it was sort of the way I would describe the way I would describe this movie is imagine a movie where every single behind the scenes character could have played a henchman on Batman. And that's what this movie is, and that's one of the reasons why I sort of really enjoyed it, is because all of like this actress who only had one line in the movie had me running to IMDb to be like, who is Lisa? Who is this reporter? It took me like literally 5 minutes to scan down like the actual IMDb list of this movie to find her name. But like that's the kind of movie we're dealing with. Like,
Here he comes.
Frankie, you going to sue for libel and for how much?
My paper check, Clinton, Frankie, and they do have you on the books down there for prostitution and for procuring.
Yeah, how you gonna explain that, Frankie?
That's not easy to explain. You're on the books for
Quiet, boys, quiet. Hold it down, please.
I explain it by telling you to go 3 days without anything to eat. By working the road for a handful of bucks so you can get a bunk for the night. Sure, we were arrested. We were shortchanged by a crook. And when we put up a beef, we were booked on those charges, but we were just trying to make a decent living.
In smokers with a stripper?
Yeah, Tiger. With a stripper, in smokers. Because that was all we knew how to do. We were flat broke. We didn't have any skills. So we made out the best way we could. And we're about as guilty of those charges as you are.
I had to keep the cast list handy during this movie to see if I was missing anyone in the background, because you just assume everybody is planted.
That's the other like sort of funny thing that we should mention, because this is like The Player. This is a movie that tries to up its credibility by having some like cameos by actual famous people in it. But then at the same time, it also casts really recognizable actors in other parts. So it's sort of this weird like where like the sheriff is played by Broderick Crawford,
mm-hmm.
and like the business guy who's going to produce the TV show is Walter Brennan, and you have these actual like actors who could have been put in the movie playing themselves. And
what about Jack Sue, who's just there to stand around, and then he has like a really pivotal moment at the end of the movie. Is like, why are you involved?
Yeah.
And Peter Lawford.
That's actually you talk about other actors. I actually think Peter Lawford is great in this.
I liked him in this too. I like Peter Lawford in stuff. Like conceptually, I like him in movies. He's not talented.
Yeah. Well, this is probably we sort of brushed past it, but we should probably go over the scene with Lawford, because to me it is really the only scene where Fane actually does seem like a human being.
Well, Marks, I can't promise a big part. I don't have that much to say about casting, but I mean a small part, something with a little juice.
No, thanks. I don't want any part. You got to understand something. I made the money. I blew it. My time passed. New kids were coming in on every bus. So I died. I got used to it. I don't want to be dug up like some corpse. I don't want to have to die all over again. Oh, thanks.
How did it happen so fast?
Fast? Like being stunned by a hammer. Am I bitter? Sure I am.
I don't want you to think this is charity.
There's nothing wrong with charity. I'm not Charlie Noble. I can use the money. I paid my dues in this town. Hey, don't fool yourself. You didn't give me this out of friendship or charity or even pity. It's fear, Frankie. It's gonna help bury your fear.
He recognizes something. He's not 100% moron in this scene.
And it's actually like Lawford really underplays it. He manages to make the lines work. Mm-hmm. And I think because he underplays it, Boyd underplays the scene. And so it's the only scene where like Boyd isn't at 111. And so I think that's probably the closest to the movie. If all of the movie had been played at this level, it would have been a much better movie.
It would have been a real movie. It could have been an actual dramatic movie. I don't know if what's the pieces that are here ever turn into something good.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It's at that point it's forgotten. right? Like it's just sort of a relic, and it gets swept under the rug, and somebody talks about it as like, oh, I stumbled across this movie starring blah 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 blah. No, it wasn't very good, but in its form that it's in, we're talking about it now because it's an unforgettable experience watching this thing.
Well, because it gives you a really good example of how Hollywood wanted to lampoon itself, like, or just not so much lampoon, maybe to skewer itself, but it's done in such like a tasteless way. Like
they wanted it to be a wink, like they wanted it to be this pretty melodramatic movie with.
Wink. I think they really wanted.
I think the Hedda Hopper like thing, like there are certain things that it's like, okay, I see. I think I know why she's involved in this movie. I understand why we have, some of these lighter moments.
And well, speaking of other stuff that does work, I do like the scenes with is it what's her name, Hale, Lucy Hale, as the early on when he's starting out, he has to do these like PR sort of dates with this sort of vacuous like blonde like star, and I actually thought the scenes with her were really fun.
Miss Barker? Thank you. Miss Barker, anything to say about your next picture?
Oh, the studio is just pleading with me to do a picture with Jack Lemmon, but I really haven't made up my mind yet.
Well, who's the gentleman you're with, Miss Barker?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I respect Mr. Lemmon. I think he's a marvelous actor. It's just that I feel I should wait until the right script comes along.
The gentleman you're with, Miss Barker, what's his name?
My last picture was so terribly exhausting, I really feel I need a rest. But the studio is spending $1 million to exploit it, so I've agreed to travel to several of the openings.
This way, Miss Barker, please. Hold it, Miss Barker.
Excuse us, fellas, but Miss Barker has to go rest her mouth a while. She's been talking all evening.
Yeah, she's fun. She escapes the dialogue trap.
Yeah.
And for I don't know how, but she wasn't forced to say things that. I guess my baseline here is like there is dialogue. 90% of this movie is dialogue no human would say. And there's stylized dialogue in movies, and we recognize that as acceptable. And then there's naturalistic dialogue. This is nothing. Like, it doesn't sound right in a movie. It doesn't sound right in reality. So it's something that's over the top on both counts. And like we talk about being at 11 or like a volume metaphor, but what it is like every line, the intensity has been heightened to a degree that's. It's not just unrealistic, it's farcical.
Well, the analogy in my head that I came up with is I don't know if you've ever had the horrible experience of seeing untalented actors perform Shakespeare and they clearly have no idea what the words they're saying actually mean.
Well, that's a high school production.
Yeah. So that's very much what this movie is. I don't like Elke Summer has no idea what she's saying. Like she and you feel to the point that you actually feel bad for her.
I felt terrible for her.
Like you listen to like sort of the words she's saying and they don't make sense. And so it's not a case like she was a blonde Nordic beauty who was cast because she was a blonde Nordic beauty. So her acting was never really relevant to her film roles. But this like Meryl Streep would not have been able to make this dialogue work.
No. There's no human that could turn this into reasonable cinema.
But then you have the scene where he goes into their bedroom and turns on the light, and she's wearing this negligee, and you're like, oh, that's why she got the part.
That's why she was cast. And it doesn't come to anything. She's just wearing it.
Well, that's the hilarious thing. It's like that even makes you hate him more. Because he has this huge bed that can sleep like 10 people. And she's in this gorgeous negligee, and she looks gorgeous in it. And he basically ignores her, gets in an argument with her, puts on his pajamas, and then gets into bed. And then when she tries to snuggle up with him, he bats her away. And it's sort of like, for that alone, you want him bad things to happen to him. Like all the other stuff has been horrible, but the fact that he bats her away at this moment when she clearly is horny as hell,
it's inexplicable.
Well, and also and also there's the sequence where like he basically relentlessly cheats on her with prostitutes. Like they really stack the deck against him, and that's sort of the amazing thing is like because like we talk about how like there are no sort of humanizing moments for him, is like they could have cut some of these scenes and given him one or two humanizing moments, but it was really super important to them. I don't know so much Ellison. I think this one we may be able to put on Rouse and Green, but I'm sure they worked with actors who were like this, and I think probably there was an element of revenge in this movie. Like they probably had specific actors in mind when they made this. They were like, we're going to show people what the movie stars they like idolize are really like in real life.
In those moments, especially the one where you're talking about where he bats her away, it really did remind me of some of the noir tropes, you know, and I could see some of that creeping through into this movie, and it was just further demonstrating how nobody involved in this movie was equipped to handle it.
Well, it's funny because their script, like as screenwriters, they worked mostly in noir, but as a director, Rouse tended to work sort of in movies more like this, in terms of like very bright Hollywood, like westerns. And he did a movie I want to see because it's one of Raquel Welch's earliest roles, but I can't remember what it's called. But it's about Shelley Winters as a brothel owner. And so I'm very interested in seeing that. I don't think it's available anywhere, but I'd love to get my hands on that. But it is funny because they do have that noir background. So you figure like if they had leaned into more of that instead of like sort of the glossy sort of Ross Hunter, like Hollywood side of this movie, then it wouldn't have been good, but it still would have fit the dialogue better. Because like this dialogue, a lot of it is aphorisms, but it's really hard hitting, and like it's what Ellison it's Ellison basically trying to be Odette. It's Ellison trying to be like Sweet Soul of Success and The Big Knife and The Bad and the Beautiful, and he's playing it way too hard. Like every line is a major line, and the problem is that once every line is a major line, none of the lines are major lines. And,
the movie you were talking about while before we go too far away is called "A House Is Not a Home" from 1964.
Okay. Yeah, so like I could see myself enjoying a movie like that made by Rouse. Like I think like there are elements of this movie that just from a pure like style and like visual point like are right in my wheelhouse. Like I love movies that look like this. This is sort of like the kind of movie that I really enjoy watching just on a visual level. The problem is that it's filled with characters who are terrible and actors who cannot make, you know, them like compelling. Because I don't mind terrible characters if they're compelling. The problem is that especially Boyd, we haven't really talked about Boyd. Like we've talked about like how bad he is, but like there's like before this, like his big role was Ben-Hur, which
right.
Which I think you have to give him credit because like that's the movie where he was sneaking around with Gore Vidal to give that movie a gay subtext that, you know, that Charlton Heston had no idea about. Right. And he also did Fantastic Voyage, which is also a much better movie. So Boyd could be like in good movie.
You know, I liked him in Ben-Hur, and I haven't seen him equal to that. I mean, it's more theatrical. He gets to play it bigger. And maybe there's something to that.
And also, he's doing an American accent because he's an Irish actor. So I wonder how much of that is informing his intensity. Like it's easier to do the American accent when he's playing it at that high sort of level than it would be at the lower levels.
You know, he's been in some Eurospy stuff. I thought he's been fine. I've seen him in probably a dozen different movies when I was scanning his IMDb, and some of them I didn't remember him being a part of. So he's
not a super memorable actor. Like there's a genre of actor who I find really fascinating, and I think it applies to this movie, and that's like an actor who is cast to be a movie star because they look like a movie star, but they never actually really became a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, like the archetype of this for me is Harry Hamlin, and like him in like Veronica Mars, where he plays like the world's biggest movie star in that TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And like we know that Harry Hamlin never became the world's biggest movie star, but still we kind of buy it because he has that face. And that's a general, like, that's sort of a type of, like, it's a specific archetype in movies that I always find fascinating. Like when they cast someone who would not rise to that level in real life.
I should mention it. I wrote this down, and I think it's a good place to mention it. But in a 1957 movie called 7 Days from Now, Stephen Boyd plays a character named Will McKinley. So, Will, if you're out there, this is, you have to see this movie and tell me how vanilla Stephen Boyd is, because I'm not going to seek it out. So yeah, but there is something to that. The character actor who never becomes a true leading man because he looks like everybody else.
Like, he looks like a movie star. Like, Stephen Boyd looks like a movie star, but still watching it, we know, oh, he's never going to be a movie star.
I never remember his face. Like, I know I've seen him in things. I know I've talked about him.
I think it's because like we have this idea of movie stars having like this perfect handsome face, mm-hmm. but also like or beautiful face, like with women. But often those are the ones who fail because you need to have something distinctive to stand out.
Right.
Like the truly like I remember Joe Bob Briggs said this about the actress Lana Clarkson, who was murdered by Ron Spector or Phil Spector, mm-hmm. that she was so much more beautiful in person than she was on camera because her features were so perfect that mm-hmm. you actually couldn't even see the beauty on screen. And I think that's like those type of people, you assume they're going to be huge stars, but they don't because they don't have like faces that say anything on screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's like Boyd, like he has like sort of like this chiseled features and the dimpled chin. So like he does look like a matinee idol, but he just doesn't have the chops to like be a charismatic. He doesn't have the personality that you need. Like compare him to the Rock Hudson, who like
right.
You very easily compare them in terms of the way they look, but Rock Hudson still had a certain macho charisma that came off on screen that made him a movie star.
And apparently he was a Scientologist. Doesn't really help him here. But he starred and narrated a Scientology recruiting movie titled Freedom in 1970. And apparently you too can find this film at the Library of Congress.
Well, he probably turned to Scientology after this movie flopped.
And it's not, curiously enough, it's not available on any Scientology resource. Which means that he apparently, like his character, pissed off everybody in Scientology too before he finally got out.
Probably. So,
but he died at the age of 45.
Well, I think that's probably why he's not better remembered today. Like, he's one of those actors who died young, like, and so never really had a chance to make a comeback or like do something memorable. Or he may have just ended up being one of those actors who like had, a few big roles in the 60s and then just didn't really amount to anything and sort of faded away. Like, it's hard to tell which would have been like, we don't know if he would have ended up in like a Quentin Tarantino movie at any point.
Right. The most interesting thing I could find about him besides, well, okay, so the Scientology is one thing, but the second thing was that he apparently spurned the advances of Marissa Mell for a number of years.
Jesus Christ.
Before they made another movie together called The Great Swindle. Apparently they were in 2 movies.
Yeah.
And then they became lovers after a few years. So he successfully evaded Marissa Mell.
That takes a level of willpower that I do not possess.
No.
For the uninitiated, watch Danger Diabolic and you'll understand why that is so mind-boggling.
it's inexplicable otherwise. Yeah, and
well, we can get back to the movie because we're at the point where he's gone to Ernest Borgnine to plant the thing, and it actually appears to be like working for him. The press seems to be buying it and getting him some sympathy, but the problem is that he went to the wrong guy, because Ernest Borgnine was like, "Oh, I never like screw over my clients," except he totally does.
Except you right now, right this moment.
Yeah. So what he says he said he won't say that Fain hired him to leak the thing, but he will tell the press that the other 4 actors didn't hire him.
Right.
So basically, sort of like, screwing him over that way. And he said he figures he can get $5,000 from each of the 4 different actors. So as a deal, as a special rate for a friend, he'll only like charge Fain $15,000 to not go to the press with this info that the other actors didn't hire him to leak this info. And the problem is that Fain is completely broke. He doesn't have a penny to his name. He's spent everything, and so he and Borgnine refuses to believe this. And Borgnine is at full Borgnine in this, and it is sort of I'm not quite as convinced that he is doing a great job here, because I'm trying to I'm watching this movie, like this is a movie called The Oscar, and he's one of the Oscar winners in it. And I'm not sure I can tell. I would have been able to tell that if I had just watched this movie without.
Certainly not. My attraction to this performance is not the quality, per se.
It's full Borgnine. Yeah,
it is 110% full Borgnine.
Our deal was I wouldn't tell who hired me to dig into your past. I'm not going back on that. But a couple of public relations guys called to feel me out. They work for 2 of the other nominees. They wanted to know how much it would cost for me to let the newspapers know that it wasn't their clients who hired me.
This is starting to smell, Yale. Put a little chlorophyll in the conversation.
Listen, Frankie, this can mean as much as 20 grand. There are 4 other nominees. I need that money, Frankie. The divorce and all, I can use it. Now, you win that Oscar, you stand to make millions. Why shouldn't I get a few bucks? It only seems fair. I got a good reputation in this town. Everybody knows I can be trusted. I don't reveal a client. I'm not telling who hired me, just who didn't.
Fain is running out of options. He goes to Milton Berle for the money, but Berle refuses to give him any money, and basically gives him his release, saying he's not going to be his agent anymore. And what I learned from the commentary is that apparently what was cut out of the movie was that there was a scene before this with Berle at the hospital finding out that he's dying. So that was sort of the impetus for him to cut Frankie, was pretty much like, I'm dying. I'm not going to live, the remaining like months of my life dealing with this asshole.
That's an intense scene for a tertiary character.
Yeah. And the only really way you can tell, like, basically, if you watch the movie, and you basically have to rewatch it once you know that scene was cut, is that Burles like has some sweat on his like forehead. So like, because he doesn't even cough or anything. There's no like visible sign that he's ill. But that's the scene. So basically, he now doesn't have an agent. He needs the money, and so he goes to Jaime, and they figure they have 2 options. They can get dirt on Borgnine through his ex-wife, who is played by Edie Adams, or they can kill him. So Fain manages to find Adams, and she tells him about all of the sort of like aliases that Borgnine has that are where he's basically hid all of his hush money around town. And so with that, Fain is able to go to Borgnine and get him to shut up, because he doesn't want to be busted and have his like money taken away.
He just kind of walks by him. This is how I remember the scene. I'm sure it didn't happen this way, but this is how I remember. He kind of walks by him, drops a name, and kind of like sachets away.
Yeah.
And Borgnine's staying there like open mouth. How'd you know?
Well, and it's hilarious because he goes to all this trouble to find Edie Adams, to get this name, when she'd already mentioned that name like in the previous scene she'd been in.
Yeah.
Like, so like he basically, all he had to do was remember the name that he had already had. And
I heard it. I'm like, I've heard that. Why have I heard that name before?
and so we now cut to back to Fane's place, and he thinks he's in the clear, but he doesn't realize that Jaime, like he hadn't told Jaime to stop like searching for a guy to kill Borgnine. So Jaime basically went on a bender and comes back and is just like he's done. He's completely
the scene is perfection.
Yeah. And that's why he's like sort of, because as like Bennett isn't good, but he's doing everything he can with what he has.
You know, man, you're some kind of poison.
You're lushed. Hey, let Sam take you inside, lie down for a few minutes.
Tell me, old buddy, what happened? No, wait a minute. Let me guess. Let me see. You got two side boys from Kansas City to dump old Bonnie Yale in a cement mixer, and he's currently 1.5 miles on new freeway in Pasadena.
What the hell's your story, Jaime? What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with me? You're wrong with me. And for one split second, I almost went for it. I almost went for it all the way, ready to cream Bonnie Yale.
I never said anything about creaming Bonnie Yale.
Birdseed, Daddy, that's exactly what you said. You wanted him dead, you wanted him killed, you wanted him murdered. And for one tiny moment, I almost went for it.
Like, and he is almost playing it like music. Like, there is almost a musical quality to the performance. Like, I actually kind of regret that he didn't do other roles beyond this, because I think with a better script and a better director, he could have played another role like this in a much better way.
Well, so what I was thinking watching him, and I've had this on my brain. I had this on my brain because I've been watching all of the Bob Hope movies, right?
Yeah.
And in, watching Bob Hope and Bing Crosby Road movies, they're not doing anything difficult. It's, it's easygoing, like comedy, exchange a barb. Like, it's all very predictable. And in a situation like that, there's no reason that Tony Bennett couldn't have done something similar to what Bing Crosby's doing. He could have had a little song, winked a little bit, had a lady, like.
Well, that's sort of the, like, I don't, because we haven't mentioned who produced this movie, which was Joseph E. Levine, who he first made his name bringing the Steve Reeve Hercules movies to North America, but he's probably best known today as the guy who produced The Graduate and The Producers. And so he could occasionally stumble on a good movie every now and then, but I'm assuming he was probably the major one responsible for all of the miscasting in this movie. Like, he was probably the one who insisted on Elkie Summer. He was probably the one who thought it was a brilliant idea to cast Tony Bennett.
Well, he's big on bringing in foreign product. So yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. Cheap foreign product, and sell for, any return was good return.
Well, but this was also him trying to be classy,
right?
Like, because he would go back and forth. Like, he would do the Steve Reeves movies, but then he would also bring in two women. Like, he was basically responsible for getting Sophia Loren her Oscar, and so he could work with both realms. But I think this was his attempt to really be do a classy big Hollywood movie. But he screwed it up by just not looking at the script and realizing that the degree of difficulty was such that you could not cast a first-time actor in a role like Hyman Kelly. Like, even a great actor of the time would have struggled with this role, much less, a guy who's a really good singer.
Right.
So after all this grand scene, this grand dramatic scene, we're back.
Which is hilarious because, the one thing, the movie is called The Oscar, but we're 90 minutes into the movie before he finds out he gets the Oscar. And then this scene we just talked about is literally, there are 3 minutes left in the movie after this scene.
Yep. It cuts back to the theater at where we were at the beginning of the movie, and Merle Oberon walks up to the stage to open the envelope.
Well, we should also mention that Bob Hope, there are a bunch of
the Bob Hope introduction, like a legit ceremony.
Well, but because it's funny because there are two types of cameos in this movie. There are ones that are credited in the credits, and then there are ones that aren't credited in the credits. And it's like the real big stars aren't credited. Whereas sort of like the ones who are like on there, like Merle Oberon gets a credit. And most hilariously, Nancy Sinatra gets a credit, even though she's literally on screen for 5 seconds and doesn't say a word. But she gets a pre-credit scene credit. But then Bob Hope is in it, and apparently, and this is something that I wondered at the beginning, because we see Bob Hope at the beginning doing like a sort of a truncated version of his Oscars monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, did Harlan Ellison write these jokes? And it turns out that no, Bob Hope's writers wrote those jokes, and you can absolutely tell.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the annual Academy Award show. This is Hollywood's big night, so naturally we're holding it in Santa Monica. I'm emceeing the awards because they wanted someone who could lose and keep smiling, and I've had the most practice. This night means a lot to everyone in the movie industry. This is the night war and politics are forgotten, and we find out who we really hate.
It felt real. It felt like, if you didn't know better, like, okay, maybe they just took part of a broadcast. Like it looks like, even the way it's filmed, kind of Kitty Wonker to the side, it didn't look like there was much framing going on, that it was just part of another ceremony.
Well, and I think that's the one thing this movie manages to do, which is very difficult, and a lot of better movies don't do as well, is when you have like sort of the award sequence, and they manage to rustle up like a C-list actor to like play the one giving announcing the nominees. Whereas like I feel like at that time, Merle Oberon, like she wouldn't have been given Best Actor, but she still would have been someone who you could imagine would have been like giving an award at that ceremony. And Bob Hope absolutely would have hosted because he hosted so many of them.
Yeah.
But you think like to something like Naked Gun 33 and the Third, where they have Raquel Welch and Pia Sedora.
So Merle Oberon opens the envelope.
And Frank stands up. And then she says, Frank. And he's like anticipating, like, oh, this is going to happen. And then it's funny because at this point, we've heard 4 of the nominees.
Yeah.
We haven't heard one. And there's a reason for that. And that's because the 5th nominee is Frank Sinatra. And that's the name she announces. And that's where we get the shot of Nancy Sinatra, because she's his date. Which she's a brunette. Actually, if she wasn't credited, I wouldn't have recognized her. And so he runs on stage, and then Frank, because he's already standing, like he's forced to start a standing ovation for Frank Sinatra in order to save face.
Yep. And that was when I just lost it. It was like, he's got to pull this together. So he has the slow clap standing ovation started. He gets it going. Like some people looking around, looking at him, and is like, "Oh, look, he's really enthusiastic about this Frank Sinatra Academy Award."
Like, oh, what a good loser he is.
What a good human. And the cherry is that it's Frank Sinatra winning in 1966 for God knows what. So like, the thought of Frank Sinatra winning an award at this point just sent me into a tizzy.
But he was an Oscar winner by this point, so
he had one, but what was he doing at the like?
Yeah, he
the
wouldn't
timing
have
of the thing
Robin and 7 Hoods.
Right. We'd given up. We'd given up on From Here to Eternity. We had moved on.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know more about this fictional movie that Frank Sinatra was in. I want to watch that movie, not this one.
Oh, sir, do you think 3 dozen cans will be adequate?
They'll have to do. That's all we've ordered.
Very good, sir. I shall call the young ladies and give them a small promotional talk.
Okay. Now, we're going to open the joint in 2 hours, so go home and get dressed.
Dressed, sir?
Well, it ain't gonna be a Halloween party. This is a classy opening tonight.
Well, now we can get to what I foreshadowed earlier and about reality aping fiction. Because apparently, what happened the year that Richard Burton was nominated for Equus, he was caught on camera standing up when Richard was announced, only to realize that Richard Dreyfuss had won for The Goodbye Girl.
Tonight's nominees for an outstanding performance in a lead role are, you want me to do it by memory? Woody Allen in Annie Hall, Richard Burton in Equus, Richard Dreyfuss in Goodbye Girl, Marcello Mastroianni, A Special Day, and John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. And the winner is a new heavyweight champ, Richard Dreyfuss!
So this is something that sort of happened in fiction and then happened in reality. I don't think Burton started a standing ovation for Richard Dreyfuss, but there is at least one incident of an actor standing up assuming that he had won when it turned out he hadn't.
It's lovely. I mean, really, certain aspects of this movie are lovely.
Well, that's part of me is sort of like, this movie is so ridiculous and so over the top, but a part of me feels like it's probably more realistic than I want to admit. Like, I could totally imagine that a lot of like minor stars were as like sort of dickish and irredeemable as Frankie Fain was. Like, that's why part of me thinks there's an element of revenge in this movie, like sort of a fuck you from like the filmmakers, like of all the assholes they had to work with who actually were like this.
And what's funny about the kind of like the structure and flow of it is that if you're not actively watching it, like tuned in, because sometimes you put them on in the background. I put on TCM in the background, I let it play, and sometimes I'm paying attention and sometimes I'm not. And if this had been on in the background, I'm not so sure I would have paid any attention to any of it. Like, it's just got this quality to it.
Yeah.
It could easily just go unnoticed.
Yeah, well, I think that's like, there's a reason why sort of it has the reputation it does. Like, it did. It's not one that I have known about this movie, like I said, since the 90s. So it's not like this is like a movie that was suddenly discovered like just recently, like unearthed or something. Like, it always had, like, right from the moment it came out, it was recognized sort of as a disaster and as a classic example of everything you don't want to do when making like a big budget Hollywood melodrama. Like, it was sort of the ne plus ultra of like the campy like Hollywood classic. And so I think that really makes it like an important movie to watch, because like this is like a kind of movie that really should be studied, because I think like you need to know what not to do in order to not do it.
It really is. You're talking about, you learn how to write well by reading bad writing.
Exactly.
And this movie does so many things wrong, clearly wrong. Like, as you're watching it, you can say, well, we talk specifically about the dialogue and how it's neither realistic nor hyperrealism, or and like, so you look at the narrative aspects, the dialogue, like every single thing is off, and you can
like
go through
the miscasting, the style doesn't match the tone, like
it's like an amazing checklist of things you can learn by watching bad movies. And I pulled some quotes from reviews for everybody. I had to go to my favorite source of bad movie reviews in Bosley Crowther.
Yeah.
Because nobody disliked movies more than Bosley Crowther, I'm convinced.
This review gets quoted in the commentary.
Does it?
Yeah.
I had two that I liked specifically. Okay, so Bosley Crowther said, not only is this screen translation of a novel by Richard Sale about a cheapskate Hollywood actor who tries to bludgeon his way to an Academy Award a piece of expensive claptrap, loaded with harrowing cliches, but it is also shamelessly endorsed by the presence of some of the great and near great of Hollywood. And Richard L. Coe, the Washington Post. This is the one. I'm like, this guy got it. The Academy Award of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences must have been on an LSD kick when it allowed itself to be used for the Oscar. That the story is a sleazy slice of muck is bad enough, but for those presumably in charge of Oscar's public image and image-conscious industry to permit such an association is far worse. Not only is the hero of this yarn a totally cardboard heel, there is no evident justification for his role to even have been nominated.
Yeah.
As if that's the really relevant aspect of the movie.
But still, like that, but it says sort of like, to me, like that is like sort of emblematic of everything that is wrong about the Oscar, is that it is a movie about making movies that never shows the making of a movie.
And it was nominated for 2 Academy Awards.
Yep, for Edith Head and production design.
Yeah.
And
Tremendous.
the production design is kind of weird because, like, basically every apartment looks exactly the same. And it looks like everybody had the exact same designer. Like, even like they make fun of this in the commentary, but like in the Joseph Cotton's office, there's a big, like, huge oil painting portrait of like George Washington or someone like that.
Yeah.
And then in Frankie's apartment, there's this big, like, a very similar oil painting. It's like, why do all of these people have the same style of oil painting in their homes?
They're like chandeliers too.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I saw the nomination for art direction, I couldn't really wrap my head around what exactly was going on there.
I think that it's just because it is so colorful. Like, it really, it is a dessert. Like, it's one of those dessert looking movies. Like, there are certain shots in here that just look delicious. But my take on that is then maybe it should have gotten a nomination more for cinematography than
that makes
production
more
design.
sense. That makes more sense to me, but
like, that's like, there's actually one actually kind of good scene that is on a dance floor where he's on the date with the starlet, and Elkie Summer walks in and he sees her after they've been apart for a while, and he just sort of grabs her and takes her on the dance floor, and there's this wordless moment between them. Elkie Summer is doing all of the work. William Boyd really isn't giving her anything, but that close-up on her face actually is one of the more compelling moments of the movie, where, like, you can tell that she has really strong feelings for him, and she is sort of happy to see him, but they're also really complicated feelings. And it's sort of like, it proves that, like, when she doesn't have to say anything, she could have been really good. It's as soon as they make her say the words that she becomes a disaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, like, I think one of the glib ways to describe the Oscar is that it's the dude version of Valley of the Dolls. and which is interesting because while this was being made, Harlan Ellison was hired to write the screenplay for Valley of the Dolls. And it's funny because Stephen Rebello, who wrote Bad Movies We Love, his last book, which came out last year, and it was my favorite book of the year, is called Dolls, 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 and it's all about the making of the Valley of the Dolls. So he actually goes into detail about Ellison's script, and it was very much the Oscar 2.0. It was like something like 180 pages long. So it was shorter than the Oscar. Like, he managed to hold himself back, but it still would have been a 3-hour movie if he had done his version of it. But you get a sense watching this movie what his version of Valley of the Dolls was, and it probably would have been an even worse movie than what Valley of the Dolls is, which is probably one of the most legendary bad movies of all time.
Who are you hiding from, Helen? The notices couldn't have been that bad.
The show just needs a little doctoring.
Don't worry, sweetheart. If it flops, I can always get you a job as understudy for my grandmother.
Thanks. I've already turned down the part you're playing.
Bull. Merrick's not that crazy.
You should know, honey. You just came out of the nut house.
It was not a nut house.
Look, they drummed you right out of Hollywood. So you come crawling back to Broadway. Well, Broadway doesn't go for booze and dope. Now you get out of my way, because I've got a man waiting for me.
We've celebrated 2 such movies on this podcast now together.
Yeah.
And, they have a number of similar characteristics. I will say that the level of creative artistry is actually present in Boom. Like what they're going for, the look that they want. They achieved a lot of what they wanted to do in that movie.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I don't call Boom camp, because to me, a lot of it is exactly what they wanted it to be. It's just that thing isn't something other people wanted to see.
Right. And this one is a misfire.
Yeah.
This one is a vision that is not attained. It could be a case of, different people were making different movies, and it came out as this.
Well, and that's the interesting thing is like
creature.
In the commentary, Eric Nelson, who actually made a documentary about Harlan Ellison, he says he actually thinks that Rouse and Green did as much as they could to honor Ellison's script. Like, he doesn't get the sense that they were like, oh, fuck this guy, we're going to make this movie the way we want it. They did actually try. And there's actually, they probably filmed they filmed a lot more of that 194 page version of the script than we even want to imagine. But it was just a case of needing to make the movie like 2 hours. They had like a lot of stuff had to be cut. Like one way you can tell like how much stuff was cut out of here is that there are transitions between shots where it is clear they are cutting between cut dialogue. So I think that's like part of the reason why this, like I said earlier, like the reason why this movie is at such a high decibel is because they probably did have the quieter moments, is just in terms of, in order to focus on the plot, that's all the stuff that got cut. And because it got cut, it's all at the highest possible pitch.
We encourage people to actually seek these movies out and watch them. Yeah. And I think it's worthwhile talking about the value. Like, what is the value of the Oscar in 2021?
Well, I think like we said, like I think you learn a lot watching a mistake at this level as you do watching a really good movie. I mean, I think you actually probably learn more watching from the Oscar about how not to make a movie about Hollywood than you would learning how to make a movie about Hollywood watching The Player. Like if I had a choice, if I could only watch 2, I would watch the Oscar and not do that, rather than watch The Player and do that. I think that's a more valuable lesson. I also like, from a pure just like talking about the editing aside, like from a pure just visual level, it's a gorgeous movie to watch. And like a part of me, like I think that's one reason why I actually sort of like these kind of melodramas, is that it's almost like when they're this campy and this bad, that just sort of makes sort of like the visual elements seem kind of extra special. I think if this movie like was quieter and like more boring, then I probably wouldn't notice the visuals as much, because it would just been a general like sort of like,
well, then it becomes
the
wallpaper,
media
and then you're not tuned in. Like you haven't engaged with what's on the screen. But the minute that Jill St. John pops up in her leopard bikini, you're like, okay, I'm invested. Tell me more. And that's when you start to receive all of the crazy, all the tone deafness and ridiculous dialogue and Tony Bennett monologues, and you're like, there's something to this movie that I've not seen before.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where like if someone tried to make a campy version of this, it would be unwatchable. Although there is a famous SCTV parody of it called The Nobel, and it's funny because most of the jokes are basically them just like playing it exactly like the movie. Like they don't actually change anything. but just in term, but the joke is now instead of being about the Oscar, it's about a guy being up for the Nobel Prize.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. L. de Regatis, and welcome to the annual Nobel Prize ceremonies. Tonight, we will be presenting awards for peace, literature, medicine, home economics.
You finally made it, Mikey. Nobel night. And here you sit on the top of a glass mountain called success. You're one of the chosen 5, and every bookie in Stockholm is laying odds that you're going to take the prize for medicine. It's been quite a climb, hasn't it? Dr. Mike Maxwell, scuffling from the bottom of the heap to the top of the medical profession, stepping over everybody that got in your way, even me, your old sidekick, and you discarded us like garbage. You ever think of how it all got started, Mikey? I do. Oh, God, I do.
Yeah. Wow.
But that tells you something that about this idea of this being a forgotten movie. Well, it was well known enough that SCTV did a parody of it.
It's hard for me to recognize. Like hard for me to believe that a sketch comedy series in the 80s would. I mean, what are the chances that movie was even available at that point?
Well, it was like that, and it was it had I think an early VHS release.
Did it?
And then it just disappeared. And there was a sense that the studio was embarrassed by it and just wanted to forget it. And it literally wasn't until I could have watched this earlier than yesterday. I've had the Blu-ray for a while now, but I've had I recorded it off TCM during one of its airings. So it has been out there, but this was basically I think it was last year or maybe last year when it came out on Blu-ray was basically the first time it actually became really easy to see.
Yeah, because I had a TCM DVR recording. I've had it for whatever. Probably this is the one you're not talking about.
It's
so that's how I watched it.
The same one I did.
I can't imagine it airs all that often.
Yeah. But then again, this is one I would say if you are interested in not even if in so bad it's good cinema, but if you're just interested in cinema in general,
it plays both ways.
This is a good Blu-ray.
Definitely appreciate it as the so bad it's good.
Yeah, but I think even people who aren't really in that vibe, I think they could unless they're really offended by bad filmmaking, then maybe not. But I think true people who love movies, I think would get a lot of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. And there are people who don't find entertainment value in the badness. And this is not the movie you should be watching tonight. This is a proper bad movie. But
and the other interesting thing I think is a lot of times I say I love movies that are dated because they really represent their times. But it's funny because this movie is dated, but it also doesn't represent its time at all. This is a movie that was made around 1965, came out in 1966, and if you told me that it was made in 1958, I would believe it in a heartbeat. There is nothing of the actual period it was made in this movie. When they go in the nightclubs in that period would be playing rock and roll. They would not be playing light jazz. It is very. I think this explains why it probably was Rouse's second to last movie, because he's a guy who's been working in Hollywood since the 40s. He made Laurel and Hardy movies. He's very much of that period, and he was never going to be able to adapt to the 60s, everything that happened after 1967.
We should mention light jazz without Tony Bennett singing.
Yeah.
Because then you would have had a reason.
Yeah. But even that's the level of show business that it's Tony Bennett, it's Frank Sinatra. They could have gotten they couldn't have gotten Elvis Presley because he was with Paramount, but that's the sort of person who should have been in this movie. That sort of era of star. And even then he was by 1966 he was kind of passé.
I think we covered that pretty well. I think we've sold to anyone who needed to be sold on it and repelled everyone else. And I think that's what we set out to do. But
imagine if it just been a really bad movie. like boring bad, not like fun bad.
I knowing what I knew about it, I was worried it was just like legendarily boring. It was hard to wrap my head around what I knew about the movie and how that was going to play out on screen. And
I had faith because like I remember like the bad movies we love, it had ratings for each one. So like they were all like basically every movie was sort of recommended as a bad movie we love. But based on the ratings, there was like these are the movies that you can miss. And then the ones with like the highest ratings were the ones like, no, you have to see this. And the Oscar was a definite, no, you have to see this.
So when I sent you the message, this movie is bananas. It was right in the middle of Tony Bennett's speech about the botched pregnancy and dead baby, and I'm like, I can't wrap my head around all that I have just seen. But
and that was at the end. Like, so you'd already experienced all of it by that point.
Yeah, I was kind of at a loss for words. All I had was this is bananas. Like I wanted to say something purposeful, but it's like I am out. But I am so glad I finally had a reason to watch this and mark it off my own personal cinema shame list.
So yeah, for the next one, I'll have to come up with an actual good movie.
I don't know. You've got a brand now.
Had hit the hood of C. Eastwood, that well-known meanie who like Fellini thought absurd. Soderbergh's claim that famous Harold Ramis was the greatest director in the history of cinema.
You have chosen wisely.